don't give a long introduction.
I think something else is being shared.
Give me 2 minutes. Just give me 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. We can start. Govind, थोड़ा 1 मिनट के लिए you have to stop screen sharing.
Okay, sir. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, Kapil.
Will I start?
Yeah.
Okay. So good morning all.
Morning, sir.
I welcome you all to the session of MA Part 1. MA Part 1 English classes being conducted online in collaboration by the 4 colleges, that is Rajkumar Keval Ramani Mahila Mahavidyalaya Nandanvan, J.M. Patel College of Arts, Commerce and Science, and Vasantrao Naik Government Institute of Arts and Social Sciences. Dear students, we have already completed 7 units from the first 2 compulsory papers. We couldn't, the class for 1 unit could not be engaged because the resource person for that unit is not keeping well. But we'll be doing it at the after all the sessions are over. That is either on the 1st or 2nd of May. So today we enter to the most popular optional paper, that is Indian Writing in English. And the resource person for this paper is Mr. Govind Rathod. Govind Rathod is working as an assistant professor of English since 2012-13. He has worked at Symbiosis College, Pune. He has worked as a counselor of MA and BA program of IGNU. He worked at Dhote Bandhu Science College, Gondia, and at present is working at the PG Teaching Department of Vasantrao Naik Government Institute of Arts and Social Sciences. He is perhaps the youngest of all the resource persons, and in his short career, he has presented more than 6 papers, published more than 5, and has been invited in more than 5 gatherings of national and international repute. His presented paper, one of his presented paper, that is Operation from Within and Narrative Imperialism, has been cited by one of the celebrated writer, Professor Gayatri Spivak of Columbia University, New York, in her readings published by Seagull Publication in 2016. I welcome Govind on behalf of the organizers and hand over the mic to him for his presentation.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, sir. May I start, sir?
Sure, please.
A very warm good morning to one and all present for this lecture on Indian writing in English. Today, I will be discussing the first unit of Indian Writing English that is prescribed for MA course of RTM in Nagpur University. And I'll be touching upon background topics given in the syllabus, as well as I'll be exploring the text for the detailed study. So this will be a kind of an overview. I'll be discussing these points, in the coming 1 hour or so. We'll be touching upon the background topics like Zamindari Association, Bengal British India Society, Young Bengal Movement, contribution of Manmohan Ghosh and Sri Aurobindo. In addition to that, I'll be discussing Torudat and her poetic brilliance, Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali, and of course, Sarojini Naidu's poetry and social awakening. To start with a very important association, and which often boast of to be or claim to be one of the first association, a political association of India. This Zamindari Association, which was later renamed as Landholder Society, was established in 12th of November 1837 by Dwarkanath Tagore, Prasanna Kumar Tagore, and Radha Sahib Dev, Ram Kamal Sen, Famli Chandra Mitra. It has been described as the first organization of Bengal with distinctive political object. It was founded to safeguard the interest of the landlords. Although limited in its objectives, the Landholder Society marked the beginning of an organized political activity and use of methods of constitutional agitation for a redressal of grievances. The promotion of landholders' interest through petitions to government and thoughtful and ordered persuasion of the bureaucracy was its professed objective. The aim of Zamindari Association were to secure a halt to resumption of a rent-free tenures, an extension of the permanent settlement of land all over India, including the grant of lease of waste land to their occupants. The demand for reform of judiciary, the police, and the revenue departments was also on its agenda. To attain its aim and objectives, the society maintained close contact with the bureaucracy in Calcutta, established links with the British India Society of London, and appointed its president, George Thompson, the Landholders Society's agent in London. With its distinctive mark of loyalism, this Zamindar Association Society, I must say, had this loyalism as one of the features, because the membership of this particular association wasn't open for the common rates, common jantas of India of that time. It was an aristocratic club of the chosen few who boasted of their place in bureaucracy, in, let us say, English Parliament, or for that matter, people who were, rich by birth, and therefore it was an aristocratic club of people of high blood, and this membership of was, not it was extended to non-British officials engaged in trade and commerce in Bengal. So it was beyond the means of common people, the common race, common jantas, to have the membership of this particular kind of highly biased Zamindari Association. As it was, kind of a, I must say that the Zamindari Association, because of its deeply interest of kind of attacking the bureaucracy, maintaining the close contact with the bureaucracy, with the self-interest, with this myopic attitude of gaining more and more prominence in the parliament in India, and of course in stretching their kind of spreading their wings towards the British Parliament as well. And as a result of that, we know that this Zamindari Association was very much notorious during that time, because it was actually very much exploitative in nature, and as they had this claim for the permanent settlement of the land, which actually took kind of took away the lands of many of the poor farmers, and therefore it was a kind of very highly objectionable association. Uh, the landholder society failed to take root in the areas outside the Bengal presidency, where the permanent settlements was not fashioned. Therefore, because of its kind of desire, kind of aim of settling the land, in the permanent way, it couldn't actually spread its wing across any other states except West Bengal. As we could see that this particular movement, breathed its last, at the end, in the middle of, let us say, 18th, in the middle of 1850s and early 40s and late 1850s. And it is often noted that this particular Zamindari association is very important for the political institutions in India, because hereafter many of the kind of political institution got mushroomed across India, and this often is labeled to be the first political association of India, although it was very much biased at the time when it was actually launched or established by these zamindars, to envisage as many benefits as they can in their own interest, and that was pretty much exploited as it could snatch away the lands of those farmers who would actually work. In addition to that, in terms of their, as they couldn't actually achieve much, in terms of the land or anything like that, but their association could achieve permanent actually lease. This concept that we use today for as we take various properties on lease. So the word lease, I must tell you, but was first used in this particular kind of association of zamindars, and even today this word has become very important for everybody in the world. And therefore, this particular movement, as not movement, actually association, this was actually limited to very few people, very few zamindars, and of course those people who were in high ranks of the society, high echelons of the society, couldn't last for long and couldn't retrieve as much benefits as they hoped for, as they claimed in their kind of aims and objectives. This particular Zamindari Association led to another institution in India named as Bengal British India Society. Its hero or protagonist, or I must say the founding father, George Thompson, formed this Bengal British Society as a rival institution to the Zamindar Association. As it was already, kind of stated that George Thompson was an agent of Zamindars in British Parliament, but he was a kind of a person with Whiggish ideals. He had those big ideals, kind of deeply rooted in his mind, psyche, and therefore, and he was pretty much aware about this exploitative nature of Zamindari association. Although he, played a part of an agent for a while, but later on he realized how kind of inhuman that association is, that actually snatches away the land from the poor farmer. So as a he, as a person with kind of liberal ideals and big ideals, uh, formed a kind of a rival institution to Zamindari Association, then that came to be known as Bengal British India Society. So it was an extension of his brainchild, British India Society, which was located in London, that promoted big ideals. Its stated aims were to foster good citizenry equality among Indian populace. It was the aim of this particular kind of association called Bengal British India Society to foster good citizenship qualities among the Indian populace, to create public awareness about the state of governance and about their just right. As we know that in those days, the rate of literacy and the level of awareness was a little modicum, and therefore people weren't much aware about their fundamental rights and rights. And therefore, in order to create public awareness, about the state of governance, how the this state of governance, or how the governance takes place, what is the process of governance, how to actually go about that, how to kind of become aware about our own fundamental rights. It was actually one of the stated aims of this British Bengal India Society to create awareness in the public regarding this process of governance and about their rights. In addition to that, another objective of this particular British Bengal India Society was to strive for their realization through peaceful and lawful means, consistent with loyalty to the person and the government of reigning sovereign in England. In addition to that, as you know, one of the objectives of this particular society was to strive for a kind of realization through peaceful and lawful means. It was stated that the people who would be loyal to the sovereign power in England, sovereign power, I think Queen Victoria was the Queen of England that time. Absolutely, yeah, she was. And therefore, the people who could maintain, see, this was one of the objectives, I must say. It was one of the objectives that the people who would actually become a member of the society would have to align themselves with the sovereign power of Queen Victoria of England at that time. The person who could actually align themselves with the sovereignty of Queen Victoria would become the member of this particular society. Although the membership of unlike Zamindari Association, which was pretty much aristocratic in nature, the membership of that particular society was limited to a few people, a few people of high class, of high station, of high strata, the zamindars or people in trade, in commerce, and of course those who had links with the British Parliament. The membership of this particular society was open to all adults, not under instruction in any public institution, paying subscription or donating the society fund and consisting subscribers aims and objective. The membership of this particular group was open to each and every citizen of India, who could actually donate something, some amount of money, or subscribes, consciously, with proper understanding to its aims and objective of British Bengal India Society. But the members of the landed aristocracy, kept themselves aloof from this particular anti-landlord stance, because this particular British Bengal Society came as a rival institution, and I came into being as a rival institution, and therefore these landlords, kept themselves away from this particular group, as it could, as we know that its secretary and kind of this particular kind of society launched a bitter attack, a trenchant attack on the permanent land settlement and the zamindars and individual matters from its platform and press. They not only actually, labeled a strong attack on the permanent land settlement, objective, but also, they in the press also, a kind of a trenchant attack was launched on this particular, attacked on the Zamindar Association of the kind of previous decade. And therefore, these people of high strata kept themselves away from this particular association. The Bengal British India Society sent petitions urging upon government for increasing employment of Indians in public offices and judicial reforms. One of the achievements, I would say, of this Bengal British India Society was a constant pestering of or urging of the government, incumbent government of that time, for increasing the employment of Indians in public offices and judicial reforms. As we know that that time it was hardly the people would get a job. They would get a job like in army only, but it was very difficult. Army or police for that, defense forces, so to say. But it was very difficult for Indians to secure a job in any other public domains, like judiciary and public offices. One of the achievements, of this particular society, I would say, was it secured, kind of, or ensured, the enough participation of the Indians in this civil services, and of course, kind of, and taking inputs from Indians to reform the judicial system of that time. It is said that it is often referred that the appointment of Indians as deputy magistrates and the reforms in the legislative department were the result of this endeavor. And therefore, the people who got appointed as deputy magistrates and reforms in the registration departments were the outcome of the endeavors taken by this particular Bengal British India Society. But neither the Bengal British India Society nor the Zamindari Association could achieve much. Although in growth of political parties in India, they played pioneering roles, both languished by 1850s. As we know that as this both a kind of these enemy institution, which were basically, formed kind of same motives, although there were a kind of slight difference, because its president, Thompson, was also an agent of Zamindari Association. But as he could establish another other institution, although it was a kind of an extension of the Zamindari Association, but it also contracted Zamindari Association in many ways, and because of their actually kind of biased stands, I would say, kind of not socialist, a kind of approach, except few. In case of this big British Bengal Indian Society, it couldn't last, for long, and therefore it both of them, kind of got languished, or people forgot, had forgotten this particular society's association by 1850s. This brings us to a very important topic, the third topic that we have for today, and this particular kind of association, which often referred to be the beginning of Renaissance in Bengal. It and many people ascribe young Bengal movement as the beginning of Bengali Renaissance, or for that matter, beginning of Renaissance in India in general. As Britishers took over India and became the sovereign power, Indians had lost faith, belief, conviction in the traditions, in the glorious traditions that they had in the past. They could, deal with themselves. It was actually, kind of consistent pestering of the Britishers that the people of India, I think, kind of common masses of India started losing interest in their own culture, right? And as we could see that, although, the many of kind of people, especially this Renaissance that we talk in terms of, the first phase of this particular kind of poetry that we have is Indian Renaissance poetry, which basically actually aimed at or targeted at creating socio-economic, socio-political, religious awakening in the people, I would say. It was aimed at, this Renaissance or Indian Renaissance that we talk about was aimed at creating intellectual, social, political, and religious awakening in Indians. Indians had lost actually faith in their own tradition and culture, and many of them, many liberal institutions came into being, and this particular kind of group of people, kind of who were the followers of a very famous Indian poet, the first Indian poet, I would say, but I must say that he is the first hyphenated case in Indian writing English, as he was, he was of two different descent. His mother was of different descent and his father of different descent. And therefore, I called him as he is the first hyphenated case in Indian writing English. Henry Derezio is often considered to be the first Indian English poet. And his poem, The Fakir of Janghira, is often considered to be the first Indian English poet. His particular hero called Henry Derezio, as I told you, is the first hyphenated case, like Indo-African colonialism. And therefore, Henry Derezio is often hyphenated case in Indian writing English for different descent. This particular group, group of, kind of people, intellectual, I must say, kind of who challenged the existing norms prevalent. This particular non-conformist group who, challenged those existing or kind of stagnant mentality of the Indians, and therefore this particular group or young Bengal often refers to as Derosians because these people were the students of very famous teacher of his name is Fabian. His name is Henry Derezio. Is often referred as Stormy Petrel. This particular kind of metonymy is often given. This particular kind of phrase is often used for this very famous man who actually shook thousands of brain and touched thousands as a teacher in that particular college called Hindu College in Calcutta. So, as we know that this young Bengal movement, as Bengal was the center of all happenings, if you could see and go back in history and could check the pages of history, you would see that Bengal of all the kind of happenings was the beginning. I would say that Bengal was of all the actually kind of upbringing, emotional, intellectual, social upbringing. And therefore, young Bengal movement or young Bengal often refer to the students of Henry Derezio. They are also called as Deresians. So this young Bengal is a socio-intellectual label that was given by the contemporary Calcutta society to the students of Hindu College, who followed their teachers Henry Louis William Derezio, a free thinker and rationalist. He was Henry Derezio was a man, of metal. Uh, in the times where speaking against the existing norms, existing patterns of the society was considered to be a serious crime, this man not only put his stand, with brave heart, but also with great his plan of blind followers, I would say, plan of blind followers themselves off to be a rational thinker, but many of his students became a blind follower of this great teacher. No doubt he was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. He was such a fascination. I must tell you that Derezio was a great fascination as a teacher. Of that time. That day I was going through the letters of Henry Derezio as I was preparing for the presentation, and I accidentally I got a book and I fell upon the letters that he wrote to the kind of people of management in the college when he was actually suspended from his post of a teacher. I was really got awestruck to read a kind of his English was so pure, so beautifully written letter. That how man, in those days could write a wonderful letter, and that too when everything was present. kind of honest way. He wasn't even, actually complaining that why he was suspended. Rather, he was happy to be suspended because that he was, pretty much sure that his suspension would lead to the creation of, or increasing people who follow this rationalist thinking and kind of free thinking of his sort. And that actually happened for few days. That he became very very famous even his retirement. Although he died after a few days of his retirement, in kind of objectionable circumstances, but his stand, as a free thinker, as a rationalist, was very very important. And it was a kind of, I must say, the beacon light. He was a beacon light that actually showed the light to his students. To you, a very famous Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher, modern German philosopher, and one of his very famous concept, he uses this concept called philosophizing with hammer. But how man, an individual thinker, a critical thinker should be, a rational thinker should be. And he uses this very famous metaphorical phrase called signifying with the man who signified with the hammer. Hammer in another hand, and stone with a hammer couple of times, like 1, 2, 3. So this particular hammer becomes an intellect, and this particular stone becomes an idea, a concept, a tradition, a culture, etc. So you literally, take something in hand, culture in hand, and apply your brain, apply your logic, there. And if, like when you hit it 1, 2, 3, if it breaks, if the idea, if you think, overthink, rethink about the idea, if that stone breaks, it is of no use. If that idea, even after thinking quite a couple of times, if that idea stays with you, idea, doesn't break, stays with you, then that could be assimilated into our personality, into our thought. He was that kind of philosopher, I must tell you. He was a Nietzschean philosopher, Nietzschean philosopher who signified with an intellect. So intellect, the rationalist thinking, brain was the only yardstick for him, coming to some conclusion. And therefore, he challenged all the existing norms in the society, all those superstitions, which were prevalent in Indian society, and that actually he also rubbed off that particular kind of approach, I would say, on his followers, on his students, I would say. So therefore, Henry Devezio, as a teacher, developed this critical outlook. He fostered, imbibed critical approach in his pupils, in his students, regarding looking at an object from a critical perspective and not accepting the things as it has been told and taught to us as it is in our personality. And therefore, he taught them how social institutions take root and develop, and how people become attached to day and socialist ideas and institutions. As we know that kind of this sati pratha, was very famous in those days, and the history tells us enough about the barbarous, stagnant practice of this sati pratha. A widow going on fire, with her husband, was very much inhuman practice, right? And therefore, uh, this particular inhuman practice was heavily criticized by Henry Devezio in his writing. If you could go through his poem called The Fakir of Janghira, there you could see, that how a man, a daku, marries a widow. So that itself, it tells us enough about, that his approach, that in those days it was a kind of a blasphemous activity to marry off a widow. It was considered to be a sin to marry a widow, because it was শুক্রবার হয়। He challenged those socialist ideas,
Govind, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, sir. Actually, I got a call.
Ah,
It got disconnected.
Can you just
I'm here.
restart it?
Yeah. Can you see my screen, sir?
Yeah.
Can you see my
No,
screen?
I cannot see your screen. I can see you only.
Okay, I'll have to restart then. Now, sir?
No.
Now?
The screen is not there.
No?
Now the screen is there. Yes. Please proceed.
Okay. Sorry for someone. I couldn't receive it although, but because of that, internet got interrupted. Yeah. So we are discussing Young Bengal movement or this particular kind of clan of people who followed Henry Derezo, and how these people, like Henry Derezo, challenged the socialist ideas of kind of patriarchy, Androcentric society of that time, or the class, caste, creed, and religion, dream society of that time. Drawing example, he wasn't just a kind of shallow critic, I would say that. He was a learned man, really learned man who could actually draw examples, from history, philosophy, and try to actually persuade his students to love knowledge and abandon the habit of living groundlessly. This is very important, actually, thing to actually know how a teacher should be. For me, whenever I teach Hindu Devezio, I always get fascinated by his philosophy, over and over again, because it's like see like how a student should be and how a teacher should be. Nobody should follow anyone blindly. So he, not only actually kind of created awareness among the students, but he also opened their minds. Like he never asked them to follow him also blindly. The teacher, he was a true teacher who appealed his students, not to follow him blindly also. And therefore, he would actually, whenever he would explain something, he would give examples, anecdotes from history and philosophy, and many other actually available sources of knowledge to his students, so as to develop habit of not believing anything blindly, groundlessly. So he had an argument for everything that he would actually put in front of the students. He had a kind of justification for all the statements he would make in front of the students, and therefore, his particular activity of kind of creating awareness, intellectual awareness among the students, was one of the hallmarks of this particular, kind of Dalhousian proof. To his students, his separated sermon was to live and die for them. And for his students, his repeated sermon, like it was like a sermon, kind of religious, saying, I would say, for his students. They were driven by truth. To live and die for the truth was the kind of battle cry, I would say, of this particular Young Bengal. most of favorite students of Derezi were a band of brilliant students of Hindi college like Krishna Mohan Bandyopadhyay, Rashid Krishna Malik, uh, and Mukhopadhyay, Ghosh, Malik, Lahiri, etc. Right? They were inspired and excited by a spirit of free thought and revolted against the existing social and religious structures of Hindu society. As we discussed regarding this kind of women education and this custom of this ritual of widowhood and sort of things, actually questioned the existing pattern of the society of that time. They question religious pattern, they question social pattern, they question all the stagnant, kind of existing norms of the society in favor of truth, in favor of intellect, in favor of logic, in favor of religion. And therefore, this often kind of references to Voltaire, to Hume, to Paine, was was very much frequent in their kind of this, writing in their discussion. It is important to kind of put on record here that Henry Derezio formed the first academic debate institution in India. His kind of debate, he would actually, after his lectures, he would ask his students to come, at one particular place, and they would actually discuss regarding various matters of the day, important matters of the day. They would discuss literature, they would discuss culture, they would discuss tradition, and as a result of that, he formed. And he was a reporter also. He found an institution, his first academic institution in India, where he would actually used to conduct debates for the students and for the people who followed truth, who followed intellect, and who followed reason for coming to the conclusion of any phenomenon, of the time of day. And therefore, this non-conformist group, coveted a Western lifestyle. They were very much, I would say, that they liked this particular Westernized lifestyle, and they launched an attack on the old-fashioned ethos deeply rooted in Hinduism and Indian society. These free thinkers, often quoted Thomas Paine, Voltaire, Hume in their debate while having tumbler of beer and beef. Can you imagine that in those days, even if you cannot think of having beer today with the students, let alone with the students, we even actually are afraid of kind of having beer in public, because this is there in our psyche. We would always think of what the people say and what the society would say. He wasn't actually at all bothered about those shallow actual opinion of the people. He would not only drink beer, whenever there would be a debate, he would actually arrange a tumbler of beers for the students and for himself. And he also ate beef. Eating beef was considered, even today is considered to be a kind of revolutionary act for the Hindus, and therefore he was heavily criticized by those Hindu religious people in Hindu people who believed in Hinduism and kind of things, right? And therefore, not only that, this liberal stormy patron, who greet, like, I would like to give you an anecdote, like when I was going through one of the books in the past, I fell upon this wonderful anecdote which is related to this very famous kind of clan of intellectuals. The anecdote is that when these people would greet Kali Mata, they would never actually, kind of take the blessing of Kali Mata. Rather, they would greet Kali Mata as "Good morning, madam." So this very kind of very much kind of way of greeting Kali Mata as "Good morning, madam." Shows the influence of westernized lifestyle on these people. This influence of the Western lifestyle was so much so that, like, although not this greeting wasn't that it showed that They were influenced by the Western lifestyle. At the same time, they were a kind of a strong critic of the Indian way of life, and therefore Kali Mata, who is an incarnation of power and is, that very famous, goddess in Bengal. Bengal is all about Calcutta, is all about Kali Mata. Bengal is all about Kali Mata. And being in Bengal, greeting Kali Mata, Kali Mata is highly revered goddess of power. In India, of course, but especially in Bengal, it is very much highly revered, right? So greeting Kali Mata in that way in Bengal, was you can imagine that it would be highly objectionable act, but they never bothered about it. The students went on to actually, kind of, they were pretty much non-conformist in their approach, kind of non-conformist in their attitude, who never actually, thought of anything else than reason, logic, intellect was the only actually yardstick for them, to believe. The reason was the only yardstick they believed in and followed. Henry Derezer fired reason and imagination improvements. He was like a true teacher, inspired try to vaccinate the minds of in society of that time. Uh, I would like to give you I would like to give you an example of how like he influenced and how it was heartening to see his students getting influenced by his philosophy, and how happy he will become after you see all these kind of development, kind of changes in the personality of the students that he taught at the college. I would quote here from his very famous poem, and the name of the poem is "To the People of Indian College." And his quotation tells us enough about how happy he was to see that his students develop an approach, a critical approach, by shedding the limits of this kind of superstition, shallowness, and stagnant mentality. Uh, Henry Deregius says, and I quote him here, expanding like a petals of young flowers, I watch the gentle opening of your mind. Like expanding of petals of young flower. Just imagine that the way this expanding of petals, like when you see the petals, they expand like this, okay? Expanding like like petals of young flowers. I watch the gentle opening of your minds. He was a keen observer, it seems. Henry Rezo was a keen observer. He could actually notice the development in his students, as he could write here. And the sweet losing of the spell that binds your intellectual energies and powers. Not only that, he could see that how he could lose, sweet loosening, he refers there, of the spell that binds everything which the society had actually handcuffed them off, had binded them off. They could see that how, everything was losing, kind of shedding away all those kind of, what should I say, unwanted, layers on their personality were removed by the learning, which led to intellectual energies and parts. So in this way, like Henry Derrida quotes from Henry Derrida's quotes from this very famous poem to the people of Indian College is very important cues an kind of indication or kind of insight into the kind of group it must have been, this young Bengal organisms as we call them. Another topic for the background study is the contribution of Manmohan Ghosh to Indian writing English. Manmohan Ghosh, as we know, he was the brother of Aurobindo. His father was a very famous illustrious surgeon, Dr. K.D. Bush, and he studied at Laurent Roto Convent largely. In 1879, Manmohan was taken to England, where he remained till 1894. On his return to India, he joined Patna College as a professor in English. He also worked as an inspector of schools and was appointed as professor in President's College, Kolkata. Manmohan Ghosh never felt at home in India, as his letters to Lawrence Binion reveal. Separation from his parents as a child and the shock of his mother's derangement and his hard struggle in England left an indelible mark on his poetic mind. Literature and friendship with Oscar Wilde, Lawrence Binion, Lemuel Johnson, and Stephen Phillips contributed a lot to enriching his mind. Manmohan Ghosh, as it is the one, I mean, liked the European ways, and as he stayed for almost 2 decades, there in England, he started thinking that England is his motherland. England is he longed for actually, for going back to England. Although he came back to India and joined as professor, at the Presidency College, but from within, from inside, he always thought of actually, kind of. I always thought of, you know, going back to England, on every given opportunity. And therefore, like, he was heavily influenced by this kind of Englishnized way or a Western lifestyle, and his liking for England has been even actually depicted in his writings as well. Therefore, his poetry, as we know that this was a phase of Renaissance in Indian writing English. But when the writers, the poets, kind of were searching for the native themes for their writing, he broke away from the tradition. He broke away from that particular kind of writing, and kind of made kind of Europe, or for that matter England, as a subject matter of his writing. And therefore, his poetry often spoke of a longing to return to England. He is pretty much nostalgic. Like his poetry has this distinctive feature of nostalgia. As he always longed for returning to England, where he had spent 22 years of his life. While his contemporaries in India, and they were actually kind of looking for a theme, of India, ancient Indian culture and things like that. He often he preferred to write on British culture. In his introductory memoir to the Song of Love and Death, Lawrence Binion points out that Manmohan Ghosh was more Oriental than Western. This would sound a bit extremist, remark, I would say, that his friend, who later on, wrote an introduction to his memoir, Song of Love and Death. He states in that particular memoir that Manmohan Ghosh was more Oriental than Western. I mean, he had this Westernized approach, Oriental approach, than the Oriental people themselves would have, towards the Britain. And therefore, the subject matters were most of the times, taken from the Britishers, from the Western culture. Ghosh's poetry expresses his sorrows and sense of loneliness and his autobiographical nature. His poetry expresses the pang of his heart, the sorrow of his heart, and the loneliness, and of course, his poetry is autobiographical in nature. His other notable works include Primera, poem by four poets, Immortal Love, and Orphic Mysteries. This poem, Immortal Love and Orphic Mysteries, basically, this work is inspired, by his wife, actually, his wife, who was very dear to him, and he found that when he could write, that he preferred to write on his wife. His wife was his inspiration for this to work, mentioned here, immortal law and Orphic mysteries, which is very famous kind of love poem, I would say, in Indian writing English. Early love poem, I would say, in Indian writing in English. This brings us to very important writer of Indian English Renaissance. Because when you talk in terms of Renaissance, it was Henry Reggio who tried to bring in intellectual Renaissance. So Sri Aurobindo developed a different brand of Renaissance, different kind of label of Renaissance. And the Renaissance that he actually tried to bring in was religious Renaissance. He was often he was kind of a yogi, yogi. Although he was very much learned and educated man, but he often referred as yogi, seer, philosopher, poet, and Indian nationalist, who profounded philosophy of a divine life on earth through spiritual evolution. He is real, actually. He was a man of genius. There is no doubt about it. Sri Aurobindo. He was, and the kind of philosophy that he developed in the form of integral yoga, the kind of brand of yoga that he developed called integral yoga, and kind of impact it had in the past on the people, and even today, like something that is very, very, kind of admirable. You must appreciate kind of philosophy that he developed as an Indian, and therefore. Although he is a famed writer of the first Indian epic Savitri. Savitri, we know that is often considered to be the first Indian epic, poetry, written by an Indian in English, right? In addition to that, what is more important for us, that the way actually he talked in terms of a super mind, this idea of super mind that he discussed, developed actually in his writing, you know, various writing that he published in the form of treatises, critical essays, and whatnot. That he talks in terms of a cosmic, actually, cosmos, cosmic brilliance, and the life on Earth, and how this particular kind of a super mind, works, and how kind of this working of the cosmic brilliance, the finite and finite that we talk about, could bring in the kind of an evolution that will ultimately lead to the betterment of human life on the earth itself. Like we know that most of the yogis, he was a yogi with a difference, I must tell you. Because most of the yogis of that time and even today, they always long for an emancipation. And as we know that this emancipation is a kind of metaphysical term, and we can only achieve emancipation as per the Hinduism after the death of one's born, right? And therefore, the emancipation is a kind of a metaphysical concept that is to be achieved only after death. But he never believed in such a philosophy. He had a different approach towards it, and he developed a different brand of actually, how to emancipate yourself by being on the planet. And therefore, this terrestrial kind of philosophy that he terrestrial emancipation that he propagates is something new, in the world, I would say, and therefore, and many a times, although he I doubt that whether he was nominated for the Nobel Prize or not, but many times it was considered. His name, people say that his name was considered for that prize. Kind of that kind of an intellectual rumor that whether we believe in or not. Many actually references, many sources tell us regarding that, but how true it is, we'll have to check that as well. So he believed in the kind of an evolution, spiritual evolution, by being on earth only. From 1902 to 1910, Aurobindo partook in the struggle of free India from British Raj. So he was a freedom fighter. He took participation in the freedom struggle movement, and as a result of that, he was imprisoned in 1908 2 years later, he fled British India and found refuge in the French colony of Pondicherry in southern India, where he devoted himself for the rest of his life to the development of his integral yoga, which was characterized by its holistic approach and its aim of fulfilled spirituality, fulfilled and spiritually transferred life on earth. This is very important, as I just have mentioned that his brand of philosophy was something new, something novel. His brand of yoga, I would say, was something different that you know, propagated to emancipate the life of human by being on earth. He focused on kind of the holistic development of a human personality. And this is very important. Like when you talk in terms of this kind of this psychologist Maslow, something Maslow is kind of pyramid of happiness, that he talks about. The last level of happiness, when we reach that attainment of emancipation, that emancipation can be achieved, by being on earth. We not no need to follow the pyramids given by the master. We are not required always to follow the pyramid of basic needs and this and that. Ultimately, the emancipation that we get. He believed that by following a few basic actually kind of things, by improving your own self, improving the own self by the bettering, by bettering your own personality, he believed that the emancipation can be achieved by the humans by living their lives on the earth. And therefore, he focused on the development of mind. For him, the mind was very important part. Mind, he believed that his mind is a super mind. He uses the concept of super mind. This mind, can be developed, in such a way that it will reach to the supreme level, the betterment of your brain, the betterment of your mind, leading to the supreme brilliance of the mind, and that will ultimately give you this feeling of heaven on the earth. For that, one has to actually focus on this particular philosophy on integral yoga, and that by his very famous guru, yogi called Sri Aurobindo. The Life Divine, is very famous book in which he propagated his philosophy of integral yoga. He rejected the traditional Indian approach of striving for moksha and moksha as a liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth and samsara, kind of thing, as a means of reaching happier, transcendent planes of existence. Aurobindo held that terrestrial life itself, in its higher evolutionary stages, is the real goal of creation. So he believed that the real goal of creation, why the God has created the world. He believed that the real goal of creation is to attain higher self, If one could attain one's own higher self, that would ultimately give him, kind of a moksha that we talk in terms of in Hinduism. We talk about a moksha that will give them a moksha on the earth only if they actually could attain their evolutionary higher self by kind of continuous striving, continuous endeavors, continuous efforts. If one could follow that, there is no need of going through this kind of patterned cycle of life, death, and rebirth, and then kind of moksha pattern of Hinduism that we have. He never believed in that. He believed that when we are on earth only, on the planet only, by raising our standard, intellectual standard, by raising our emotional standard, by raising kind of our inner being, talked about, is the real goal of the creation, and you strive very hard for that. After his death, and a lot of actually ashram during his time, and even after his death, a lot of ashrams across India were mushroomed to actually practice this philosophy of integral yoga across India, and even in other countries in Europe. We have many ashrams named after this great kind of yogi called Aurobindo, who believed on achieving emancipation by attaining higher self of one's own personality, by being on earth only. For achieving moksha, one doesn't require to go to the swarga, heaven, as we in Hinduism. Aurobindo, as Sri Aurobindo, as I told you, he held the belief that this plant life itself is in its higher evolutionary stage is the real goal of creation. He believed that the basic principle of matter, life, and mind would be succeeded through terrestrial evolution by the principle of supermind as an intermediate power between the two spheres of the finite and infinite. This is very important. That this principle of kind of that he talks about integral part, integral yoga. By integral yoga, he means many things, so many things. Okay, so these so many things can be referred as matter, life, and mind. This matter that world has created, the life that a human being has. So this would be succeeded through the terrestrial evolution on the earth by the principle of supermind as an immediate power between the two spheres, the finite and infinite. The finite, that is the Almighty, the taskmaster, the Supreme Lord, okay, and the finite, the humans, we humans. This can be achieved through a kind of intermediate kind of conversation between the and the self and the one. So in order to become the self with the one has to find one's own self. Once one has to achieve one's own actually higher self. That is what he had, briefly, referred in his philosophy of yogic yoga, or integral yoga that we have been discussing. In addition to his very famous The Divine Life, he has written many other actually, very, very important work. And reading his other, like the synthesis of yoga, I tried to read his the synthesis of yoga when I was teaching University Aurobindo a couple of years back to my MA students, and the kind of approach that he actually adopts in that particular kind of the synthesis of yoga is a wonderful read. Everybody should try to read that work. It's a teacher and students of literature, right? Essays on Gita and collected poems and plays and the human cycle, the idea of human unity, and of course, very important contribution. Sri Aurobindo, although he's not much known for his other philosophy in literary circle, but all of us know him for his epic contribution to Indian writing English. He wrote an epic with the title Savitri, a legend and a symbol. So you know that Savitri is first Indian epic written in English by an English writer, by Indian writer, sorry. And it narrates the story of Satyavan and Savitri and how Savitri reclaims the life of his deceased husband from Yama, the god of death. Right. This, Savitri, I must discuss that Savitri is an epic, and epic handling and epic itself tells us enough about his literary prowess. That handling an epic is an arduous task. It's not an easy to handle an epic. And you could imagine, just imagine that a writer like him, writing that very famous work in 1950, like would be, thing that we could actually thought of and discuss, and something that we could actually, should think about it. The epic Savitri is written in this metrical tale. It's a metrical tale, as we know, and it is written in iambic pentameter, and that follow this stress and stress pattern, and it is very difficult to maintain that throughout the epic. Epic is a huge, work, which is usually divided into 12 books. And although you couldn't write 12 books, but that's a huge achievement, I would say, as a literary person, and that he should be appreciated for that particular kind of writing and following the iambic pentameter, which is very, very difficult for any writers to follow throughout the work, and he could achieve that for his epic. That is really appreciated. After the background topic, this brings us to the detailed study of the poets that have been prescribed for the syllabus and various poems that we have. So, although I would be, kind of going through the detailed, kind of analysis of the poems that we have for the study, I will try to, kind of touch upon the poems that we have for the study for the syllabus. We also try to explain, various salient features of these various poets and how they contributed to Indian writing in English, as a writer, as a poet, and in the way, in a way which was possible. So start off with Torudat, as we all know, Torudat is often referred as first Indian women poet who wrote in English. She is often referred as the first Indian women poet who wrote in English. And her fascination, as we know, that her fascination with these British romantic poets is pretty much, evident in many of her poems that studied as a student and teach as a teacher, right? So she was a kind of a Bengali, again, a Bengali, and her father was, we know that her father, Govind Dutt, wanted her to give a proper education, kind of proper education to this girl. And as we know, that her father herself was a famous linguist of her time, his time, and therefore she hailed from a very liberal family where art, linguistics, all were encouraged. Her mother also, she was a kind of a writer. Her father was a grammarian, and therefore, she got it from her own family. We say that, charity begins at home, and in the same way, the quality begins at the home. So she got the quality at her own place, the place that she was born and brought up. She got all the necessary kind of, what should I say, things that one wants to develop. A very beautiful writer, a wonderful writer, as we know. Her ancestor Nilumani Dutt had settled in Calcutta, leaving his hometown in Ajapur some decades before. Nilumani Dutt, though pious Hindu, loved conversing to people from different spheres of life. As a result, the family was well acquainted with many Christian missionaries and European settlers, which was a sign of affluence in those days. So he had a close relation with, of course, the Britishers. His father was a person of high rank in the British, kind of army, I think. Most of her works are published posthumously. Following her death, her father started. That Guru Dutt, unfortunately, kind of couldn't have a long life. She passed away at a very tender age, and therefore most of her writing were published after her death. And this particular example, like a ship laid in the French field, was, posthumously published by her father. And of course, and that was a part of it, like his ancient ballads and legends of Hindustan, also, kind of very much famous writing in Indian writing English. Right. So, like, if you could see that, and if you could read her work, that you understand that she had, although she was foreign educated, she got educated at very famous foreign universities, but she had this kind of special liking for her own motherland. She was true, like she was young, when she was young, she lost her siblings, Arun Abju, and that had a kind of very deep impact on her writing. And therefore, in her writing, you would see that this theme of nostalgia, this theme of patriotism, theme of longing is prevalent. These are the hallmarks of her writing. So if these are the salient features of her writing, the theme of nostalgia and loneliness longing, and this poem, Our Cashmere Tree, actually explains, exemplifies this particular theme. Patriotism, the lotus, this very famous poem, the lotus has been again, kind of tells us about his her theme kind of this liking for nation and patriotism, as we know, and of course this sonnet warmly is highly influenced by the British romantics, especially Keats, and therefore this particular poem presents exemplifies, I would say, the romantic trend in her writing. First, theme of nostalgia. This theme of nostalgia has been is longing for the lost time in the past, right? Like the way we long for our childhood, the way we long for the golden period in the past, is very much common for all the human beings, and this too happens with the writers as well. The writer, through the presents, showcases her nostalgia in her writing in a very very fine way, and her poem, which is very very famous poem, I would say, Kashmir, that celebrates her reminiscence of past life, wherein she recaptures recaptures the time that she had spent with her siblings Arun and Joe, and she recollects and recalls that how this cashew tree, cashew tree is a kind of simple metaphor here, I would say. Cashew tree is an objective correlative that correlates with the nation. Okay, the nation, the memory of the past of the poet life, and therefore the tree used as a symbolic representation of the poet's past memories and the restoration of Indian culture and philosophy, prevalent idea in that's poetry. As we know that this theme of she imagines that how the tree is very much huge, gigantic. She says in this poem, in the first few stanzas, that how gigantic, how huge the tree is, and how like she describes the tree in its kind of entirety. Like it had the scarf, scarf of the flowers. And then she also describes the baboon, uh, and of course the cooing of the birds, etc. Right? But she says that the tree is not dear to him because of its magnificence, because of it's gigantic, it's huge, because it's very big, but because of you know because of the memories, the time that they had spent. They means here, we here refers to her siblings Aru and Arju, that because they bred their kind of last in at a very tender age also. Like she also died of very young age, and therefore she says that this tree, not because of its magnificence, is dear to me. Beneath it we have played, though years may roam. O sweet companions, loved with love intense, for your sakes shall the tree be ever dear to me. And therefore, this tree is dear to her, not for its magnificence, but because she had spent the golden time of her life, in the past. She had played in the boughs of the tree in the past. She could recall all the kind of time that she had spent along with her siblings, whom she refers as "oh sweet companions," right? And therefore, tree is dear to her not because of its gigantic nature, but because it gives her an impression, it gives her. Whenever she revisits that particular place, not physically, I would say, because she, as we know that she imagines the tree not being in India. She is in some foreign land. Okay, and she recalls, she revisits that particular country, India, motherland, I would say. Of course, and that through the broken images of time, broken image of time. She recalls and recollects the memory in the past and says that the street would be dear to her forever and forever. The people, like when this brand of something called this discipline of something called diasporic literature developed in, as we know, in 19th, in the latter 20th century, the late 20th century. But this particular poem gives us enough indication into the kind of diasporic writing which was there, because diaspora writing, as we know, is something something longing for the motherland. A poet here is in foreign country here in the poem, and she longs for the motherland, the native land. Although she couldn't visit that particular place, to use Salman Rushdie's very famous term called imaginary homeland, to use that in quotation mark, imaginary homeland. She couldn't visit that place physically for sure, but she revisits the place through the broken image of time, to use Salman Rushdie's term from his collection of essays called Imaginary Homelands, broken image of time, and that she receives, not in its entirety, but kind of partially she receives it. So now it's not possible for the poet to come back to visit that place physically, and therefore she receives that, through imagination, and thinks that this tree, will be dear to her forever and forever. Absolutely. And therefore, uh, she wishes to save, she wishes to save. And therefore, this particular diasporic kind of attitude that she has shows the love for her country. Okay. She lives in foreign land and she has love for her own country. This particular poem has kind of an iota, somewhere, kind of iota of patriotism as well. This also shows that she loved her country very much, and therefore she longs actually to come back to her native land, but that's not possible for her. And therefore, like she says that it's impossible to visit the place now because she's there, kind of at the French coast. She says that she's at the French coast now, and she says that this oblivion, time is the great leveler. Time will, kind of time will diminish anything. Okay, and therefore she, as the tree is very dear to us, she wishes to immortalize the tree, cashew tree, and therefore she says that she wants to save. She wishes to save that from oblivion's curse. Like the way the Shakespeare also, in his sonnets, is claimed that he wants to immortalize the love, to save his beloved from oblivion's curse. She has borrowed that phrase, from William Shakespeare's sonnet, and says that she wishes to save the tree from oblivion's curse, because time is something that levels everything. Time is the great leveler, and therefore she wishes to immortalize the tree the way, the way William Wordsworth has immortalized borrowed tree, as in English literature. Right. So in this way, she shows that how she shows the nostalgia. She shows that how she really, misses the time that she had spent with her siblings, and of course the place in India where she lived, the place, on cashew nut tree, and there they played, the place in India she misses, and therefore all these combines to make this nostalgia, and therefore she revisits the past, through the broken image of time. And therefore, this is a reminiscence of the past memories that she had spent in the company of her siblings in the boughs of the tree in India, as she claims. And therefore, her wish to utilize tree to save it from the oblivion's curse is pretty much kind of a natural humanistic approach that we have to it. So in this way, this theme of nostalgia is recurrent throughout this poem called Our Cashew Nut Tree. Now, this Our Cashew Nut Tree, as I told you, is a symbolical representation here. I told you that this is an objective correlative. That object that stands for something. Okay, and therefore it stands for motherland. Okay, our Kashmir tree is my country, stands for Mother India, and therefore this use of metonymy here, in this particular poem is pretty much significant, as I would say, as it also projects the theme of nostalgia and, of course, the patriotism of the poet. It brings us to another features of our poetry, and as we know that theme of patriotism, as it was a time of social awakening, as it was a time of political awakening. Okay, as it was an Indian Renaissance, which was prevalent everywhere. This theme of kind of patriotism is also one of the features of the writings of Thoreau, and that is evident through this very famous sonnet called the Lotus. You might have heard about this sonnet. This is particular sonnet that has this very Petrarchan sonnet, which is often referred as Italian sonnet, and John Milton is kind of a follower of that kind of sonnet in English literature. But in India, I would say that the first person who imitated the Petrarchan style of writing the sonnet is this particular title of the. She has this writing scheme of ABCDC. It has got 2 octave and 2 tercets, which combines into 2 octave. Sorry, it has got 1 octave and 1. Sorry, it has got 1 octave and 1 sestage. So 1 octave combines 2 quatrain ABB, CDC, or ABB, CDC. So it follows the Italian pattern of the sonnet. And this sonnet, it gives us an impression about how kind of her love for the nature and how she projects through a nature agent, in a nature element. Actually, she projects the supremacy of Indian culture over the other cultures in the world. As we know that Lotus is a beautiful sonnet, wherein there is a sort of a debate between the rose and lily to claim the title of the friendliest flower in the world. Okay, so like the Cupid, goes to the flora asking for the friendliest flower on the earth, and as he could, she could see, the goddess of Flora could see that lily and rose are for long claimed for this title. Okay, because rose is very much seductive in nature and lily is pretty much princely in state, right? And therefore, they don't. These both the flowers, don't have the kind of quality that the kind of flora was looking for, and therefore, this stateliness of lily, because it has got this mane, okay, stand like this, and very much proud, this flower, lily seems is very much, it has a pride. Okay, in the same way, rose is a beautiful flower. It has got seductive nature. It is very much seductive. It looks beautiful. It looks seductive. It's a symbol of love, as we know. And therefore, when it is decided that he says that, no, I want a flower. I want a flower, which would be combination of both the things, and therefore this goddess of Flora gives kind of redness of flower, red dyed, and of course this princeliness of pride and honor of the lily, and creates another flower, and that flower is the lotus. If you look at the lotus is kind of a pinkish flower, okay, which is actually a combination of red and dyed and this particular leaves color, isn't it? And therefore, it tells us enough that the lotus, as it is an Indian flower, is the combination of the best in the world. Indian culture is an eclectic culture which has got the best of the best in the world culture, and therefore, she metaphorically says that the Indian culture is the best culture in the world. So it shows that how her patriotism, how she says, how she kind of propagates here that Indian culture is the best culture in the world in the form of this metaphorical kind of imagery called the lotus here. So this symbol, speaks enough regarding Indian culture, as it is, highly revered flower in India, as it is, an embodiment of Indian culture, and therefore her liking for Indian culture and her liking for India, and this particular flower, the lotus, is a representative of Indian culture, and therefore Indian culture, she claims and she thinks of, and she puts forth, is the best culture in the world. And therefore that particular kind of, as people of India had lost kind of what should I say, belief in their own culture, they thought of, started thinking of that Indian culture is of no use. Writers like this created kind of social awakening among the people, regarding their own culture, that how kind of how rich the Indian culture is, how beautiful the Indian culture is, and therefore she tries to put on pedestal, she tries to romanticize the Indian culture by showing the supremacy of one flower, the lotus, in the poem. The next feature of her writing is the theme of romanticism. We know that the theme of romanticism is very much common in writing today, but I would say, along with few writers, as they were actually the first people who write in English, and I would say that C.L. is the first of the Indian romantics, who follow the footsteps of the British romantic writers. If you go through her poem called Bogmary is a place actually, is a name of the garden of the poet, and this place, tells us regarding the varied hues of varied hues, colors that are available in the garden called Bogmary. And therefore, this describes the various colors and plants that speakers observes in our garden home, ranging from the tamarind to mangoes to palm and simmons to bamboo and lotus plants. So this use of kind of nature imagery, kind of, she uses this Bogmary, kind of a garden. This use of nature imageries like names of the trees and mangoes, mango brews, and palm and simmons, bamboo, and etc. These all natural agents, kind of mentioned in the poem, gives us a kind of indication regarding the natural elements in the particular poem. She presents, different hues and colors of the nature in this particular poem, the variety of colors that are present, and therefore this variety that offers, that offers a kind of special visuals colors, or kind of interpretation of various things, we get attracted towards it for sure. And therefore the kind of explanation that she gives of a various kind of natural objects available at her garden, the way she presents that in a very vivid way, a kind of something photographic way, that gives us an enough indication in that how the way kind of Keats described autumn season in his Ode to Autumn, which is also very much vivid, kind of vivid, although that is a bit more philosophical in nature, but this particular poem also vivid nature of the British romantics, especially John Keats's kind of description in Ode to Autumn, in terms of the vivid and visual description of the kind of nature imageries in the poem. And therefore, this garden seems, for the writer, she said that, this intoxicating quality of the plant's beauty in the garden, gives her an impression that this garden, here is not a simple garden, but it is heaven. She calls that as Eden garden, which is often been a reference to the Bible, that kind of which is very pious, in Christianity, and therefore this visual in kind of reference to this primal garden or Eden garden that we have, refers to the Christianity, because she was also kind of that she had also liking for the Christianity, as her father had covered the Christian religion thereafter. So it is also an autobiographic in nature. In addition to that, what we have discussed, so far, like we know that we have discussed, like, regarding Her features of writing. We started off with patriotism, theme of nostalgia, then we came to patriotism, and then we discussed about this romantic nature in her writing. And collectively, if you look at this, that how autobiographical nature of her poetry. So that also becomes one of the features of writing, that her poetry is autobiographical in nature. All these descriptions that gives an impression that her poetry was autobiographical as well in nature. Sarojini Naidu is highly revered modern Indian women who became the first president, first women president of Indian National Congress. She fought for the civil rights of civil rights for women's emancipation, and she was very much active in this Indian freedom struggle movement. And she was a very close aide of Mahatma Gandhi, and Mahatma Gandhi bestowed kind of called her as Bharat Putila, and she is often referred as the Nightingale of India. This sobriquet is often used for Sarojini Naidu. For she would sing beautiful poems, beautiful songs in various actually sabhas that was to be used to be conducted in the past for the freedom struggle movement. So she would read those poems, because and then you would see that the way she used to read the poem, because it was actually in a band to read in literature, which would actually provoke the people to rise against the British authority. And therefore, she would write poems in such a way that the Britishers should not get any idea regarding the poem, whether this is regarding the freedom struggle movement or this is simply a poem. And therefore, most of the poems that she wrote are presented in that way, that most of the poems, I would say, most of her poems were read on the stage to inspire, to motivate the Indians to join this freedom struggle movement in India. So she is often referred as president of International Congress, and at one she went on to actually winning of the powers in political scenario in India as well. Right. So there are a few features of her writing, like one of the key features of her writing is lyrical quality. One of the most important features, one of the most important hallmarks of her writing, I would say, is the lyrical quality. In addition to that, she has also got a patriotic fervor in her writing. She develops a kind of a local flavor, local color in writing, and she also uses a very vivid and clear and strong imagery to kind of present her case in front of the reader. Right. First thing first, theme of patriotism. This theme of patriotism, as we know, that was very much, as she was kind of a freedom fighter herself. She took an active participation in freedom struggle movement, and she was the one who closely cooperated Mahatma Gandhi for this non-cooperation movement, and later on she joined the Salt Satyagraha. We know that she was through and through a nationalist and patriotic person. She reflects, that she presents that kind of patriotic fervor, a patriotic seed in her writing as well. And as we know that her writing is marked with this great sense of patriotism. She has quoted this beautiful line. I have quoted this beautiful line from The Gift of India, and she criticizes Britishers for taking the Indian soldiers for fighting for their cause, right? And she also is aware about that how thankless the Britishers would be, after they will achieve their desired aim. But Indians will lose many of their sons, and Britishers will not even shed a tears in the memory of their Britishers. So it is an appeal to the Britishers, this particular, the gift of India, she says. The gift of India here is, of course, the kind of soldiers who have sacrificed their lives for the betterment of the British society, for the betterment of Britishers' lifestyle, and better expanding their own actually, kind of empire, as we know. And therefore, she says, can we measure the grief of the tears I weave, or compass the wound of the watch I keep, or the pride that thrills through my heart's despair, and the hope that comforts the anguish of prayer, and the far side glorious visions I see of the torn red banners of victory. She, tells us that, the griefs cannot be measured, whichever grief these soldiers might have suffered cannot be measured. And therefore, this victory, that the Britishers will achieve, that will be of torn red banners, that will be torn red banners of victory. It will be at the cost of the bloods of the soldiers of India. And therefore, we start to work out that poems speaking in India. The U is Britain, and that the poet is deeply sad and angry at the thought of India sending over 1 million men to support its colonizers for effort. Even victory is torn, it is in 10 torn red banners in the poem. And therefore, there has been a huge amount of memorial thanks to the comrades who fought in your countless ranks, he says, but very little of this thanks is directed as martyred sons. And therefore, he says that there would be kind of huge amount of memorial thanks, kind of obituaries, given to many soldiers in the world. But she is a bit doubtful that, how many of these thankful memorials will be directed towards the people, the soldiers who sacrificed their lives in the war for the cause of Britishers. She questions this particular approach of the Britishers, and therefore she appeals them that these soldiers should be given equal justice, after they sacrifice their lives. At least, some line should be honored in the memory of this soldier. That is what she, I think, appeals from the Britishers. The second poem that is very significant, and it is there in the syllabus as we know, that Coromandel Fisher. Coromandel Fisher here is a beautiful poem presented in a very much metaphorical way. It tells us regarding Sarojini Naidu's appeal, Sarojini Naidu's appeal to the Indians, to the people of India, to join this movement of freedom struggle. Although it is not, this is a kind of, I would say that, kind of hidden actually intention of the writer. Overtly, we see that this is about a kind of fisherman, and she appeals the fisherman to rise and go for the catching the big fishes, kind of, because the sea, and that sea stands for a motherland, clouds, and of course the soldiers, kind of clouds. Sea stands for a motherland. She takes everything in her bows, kind of thing. So the sea is a motherland, and therefore, we need to go to catch the fishes. It means that motherland is been kidnapped, handcuffed by the British soldiers, she says, and therefore she appeals that, there would be sort of a different pleasure, she says that, of course, we need to set our catamarans free, because we have got a lot of actual restrictions, as Indians, we had a lot of restrictions as human beings. We were afraid of the Britishers, and therefore it was very, very difficult for the British and for the Indians to join the freedom struggle, because Britishers would take the strong measures against such people who would actually spread kind of rumors against them. Therefore, it was a kind of a challenging task for the Indians to join the movement of freedom struggle. See, kind of in a beguiled manner, appeals this Indian people to join this freedom struggle movement. Because to capture the leaping wealth of the tide for we the kings of the sea. Because, sea refers this fisherman as the king of the sea. Here, fisherman stands for the Indian, and the sea stands for the Mediterranean. We, the Indians are the king of India, and therefore we should, kind of live this wealth, wealth that is the wealth which is stolen by the Britishers, the glory which is stolen by the Britishers. She says that it is time to reclaim that stolen wealth, the sleeping wealth, which is there actually available in the country, and therefore she, presents two different approaches here. And approach number one is that. Of course, at home, you'll get something, regarding toil and toil. She says that, by staying at your place, you get kind of happiness, but that happiness will be ephemeral. He says, she says, sorry, that happiness will be ephemeral. That will be a transitory pleasure. That will not actually emancipate your soul. That will not emancipate the country from the clutches of British imperialism. And therefore, what a great pleasure, she says. What a great pleasure, she says, to rise awake and fight for the cause of the nation. And therefore that particular kind of cause, to go on the sea and to actually fight with kind of the various enemies in the sea, and to actually get victory over them, would be an achievement. And losing life in such an endeavor, losing life in such endeavor, she says, would be highly appreciated, and that will actually beautify the life of a person, she says at the end of the poem. And therefore this poem, is pretty much patriotic in nature, although it is presented metaphorically, so as to actually, kind of hide from the Britishers. As I told you, that it is written in the form of a song, basically, because most of her poems were presented in the form of a song at various sabhas which were conducted in the past to address the people by Mahatma Gandhi. Another quality of her writing, and which is the most important quality, I would say, this is the most important quality of her writing, and that quality of her writing is reflected through this particular poem called The Palanquin Bearers. This lyrical quality, lyricism, as we know, is one of the key qualities, of her writing, one of the salient features of her writing. And this particular poem called Palanquin Bearers, the way it presents the lyrical qualities that it presents is really something that, we should actually, kind of look for. This movement of, as you could see, that the movement of the words are arranged in such a way in the poem, that gives us an impression of the palki, the way the palki, being carried, by the Palanquin bearers, the way that movements like this, the way the movement happens like this and that. In the same way, this swaying movement of the palki, is correlated here with the movements of the words in the poem. And therefore, lightly we bear along. See this, the beginning of the poem is pretty much in a kind of lyrical. Lightly we bear along. She sways like a flower in the wind of her song. She sways like a flower in the wind of her song. She skims like a bird on the foam of a stream. She floats like a laugh from the lips of a dream. See this kind of, as if the words are swinging from one to one. When we read these lines, she sways like a flower in the wind of a song. She skims like a bird on the foam of a stream. She floats like a laugh from the lips of a dream. All these actually gives us impression, regarding the lyricism that this poem had. This poem is highly lyrical in its nature, because each and every, kind of, and this is lyricism at its best, because the movement of palki and the movement of the words here in the poem, they are in a way correlates. This way like this, and this the way the palki is being carried by the Palanquin bearers. We bear along, gaily, oh gaily, we glide and we sing. We bear her along like a pole on a string. And that goes on. Lightly, oh lightly, we glide and we sing. We bear her along like a pole on a string. And that continues. This is a beautiful example of lyrical poem in English literature. Fine. With this particular poem, poets actually, kind of, I tried to cover poets kind of a life and her writings were in brief. The next poet, which is a very important poet, I would say, and we must discuss that also. And the poet is one of the Tagore, the first person I would say who gave this particular Indian writing in English a global currency. You know, we know that Indian writing in English achieved the global fame after the publication of Rabindranath Tagore's very famous work called Gitanjali. Gitanjali, as we know, is a string of lyrics. It's a basically a poem which was written in Bengali, which later he himself translated into English. And that poem, as we know, gave Indian writing English a global currency. Of course, we had many wonderful writers in the past, but the first writer who achieved global fame is Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, and that too for his wonderful collection of lyrics called Gitanjali. Gitanjali is basically offering of song. It's a Git means Git and Anjali. This is actually Anjali and Git. It's a collection of song. So the way we offer flowers to God, it is offering of songs to the Almighty, to the great taskmaster in the poem, right? And therefore, this is an appeal of a devotee, and this Gitanjali is nothing but a kind of a conversation between the God and the poet. He considers himself as a kind of a person who seeks the love interest of the God. So this pure, very fine analogy of God being the love object, and he is the one who seeks to impress the God, is wonderfully woven through various lyrics that we have in the poem. It is a collection of, I think, 146 lyrics, and it's a beautiful, actually, collection of lyrics that we have. So when we discuss about, his contribution, like he is not only restricted to this work, kind of one work, Gitanjali. He has he wrote many of the poems that we know. His contribution to Indian lifestyle, his contribution to, what should I say, freedom struggle movement, and the way actually he became a global fascination, is very significant. When I came across this wonderful introduction given to Gitanjali by W.B. Yeats. W.B. Yeats himself was a wonderful writer, and he wrote a wonderful introduction to Gitanjali in 1912. Because when the poet went to Britain and he showed this work, this kind of draft to these writers like Ezra Pound and William Butler Yeats, they simply got blown away by the kind of beauty of the writing of Rabindranath Tagore, and he happily wrote an introduction to Gitanjali, and for that he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in the year 1913, which happens to be till date, is the first and the only Indian writer who won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And of course, he also actually, boasts of becoming the first non-European writer to bag the Nobel Prize for Literature. And of course, thereafter there are many Europeans who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, but till date is the only Indian who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and that for his wonderful piece of work called Gitanjali. He, W.B. Yeats in his work called, in his introduction, to Gitanjali, shares an anecdote of how charismatic his personality was. He was a kind of, he created an aura in the globe. Rabindranath Tagore had his own aura in the globe. And he shares an anecdote that happened at a church. And he says that whenever there will be a sermon, of this great man, great yogi, he says, it would seem as if there is because all the streets were jam packed. All the streets were jam packed. There was a traffic jam, to rush to the Sunday sermon of that great man. That explains us that how he had a great impact on the minds of European. And I'm not talking about India. He is referring to country like England. Whenever he would give a sermon, Sunday sermon, there people would kind of flock down. They would rush down, and it would be like a traffic jam for rushing down to listen to this great man called Rabindranath Tagore. Such was the charisma of this man, such was the quality of this man, that he was highly revered, globally revered, and because of that, he was given this title called Sir by the Queen Victoria, by the Queen of that time, to this great man. Although he had renounced that later on as a kind of, what should I say, to as a reaction against this Jallianwala Bagh massacre. But this man, as a human being, had a wonderful impact on the minds of the people. As a writer, had a wonderful impact on the literature across the globe. And therefore, this Gitanjali, this particular work called Gitanjali, is very important, and has been prescribed for the syllabus of our university, and we are happy to teach to the students this wonderful piece of art that we have. Right. So he has got many other writers. He was also an agent of this Indian writing English, an agent of an Indian English Renaissance. But he had a different brand of Renaissance. Actually, we have got various brands of Renaissance. They had different approaches to look at. He wasn't, he never actually wrote directly regarding the Indian freedom struggle movement. Rather, he criticized the approach of M.K. Gandhi's non-cooperation movement and things like that. But when we go through, his Gitanjali and a few more work, we understand that he has got a few qualities, as a writer. And what are those qualities? Or few salient features of his writing as a writer, and what are those qualities that he borrows heavily from these Vedas and Puranas. His writing is heavily marked, heavily borrowed from, or heavily inspired by the Vedas and Puranas of Indian culture and Indian religion. This very concept of Prajapati that he refers in this particular poem called Prajapati, that he refers in this poem called collection of poems called Gitanjali, is this concept of Prajapati is taken basically from Hinduism, and of course from the Hindu tradition, as we know. In addition to that, the other features of his writing, that one of the most important features I would say is the mysticism of his writing. We know that is the nature of writing that he has. That his nature, if you look at the song number 70s, 674 in general, and you will come across that how mystic he was in nature. He talks about some person at Ford who is actually playing upon his lute. He's playing upon his lute, and the song that he produces out of that are so beautiful, are so, what should I say, beautiful. Pleasing to hear. Something that pleases our ear. So something catchy that he loses himself. When he listens to that, he he loses his consciousness and kind of become one with the entity. But who is that man who's playing the lute? Why is there at the fore? Why is calling him to join him? Is really mysterious in nature. Nobody knows. He cannot say that who is that man who's playing on the lute. And therefore, this mystic nature, who that man is who's playing on the lute, and why he is calling, and when the ripples are created, when he plays on the lute, the ripples are created in the ocean. They are like whirlpool of life, he says. This gives us indication regarding the whirlpool of the life. The way the life is very mysterious. He creates those whirlpool in the ocean, in that particular kind of brook that he is playing the lute upon. And therefore, his mysterious writing, mysterious nature of his writing is pretty much evident in the song number 74 of Gitanjali. In addition to that, he was the one who always believed in, as you told you, that he heavily borrowed from Hindu culture. He was the one who believed in this particular concept called rebirth of a human being. He believed in this cycle of Indian Hindu cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And therefore, the first song of Gitanjali claims that how this how the soul transposes from one body to another body, and how the soul lives for another body after the death of a human being. And therefore, it says, "Thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure." Thou emptiest again and again and fillest the ever with a fresh life. He says that, she is the one who takes pleasure, in kind of emptying this frail vessel, that thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure. Endless means he has made him immortal, and such is the pleasure of the writer. Yes, sir. Such is the pleasure of the Almighty, the taskmaster, the Prajapati, and because it takes the soul from one body and it gives to another body, and therefore this belief of reincarnation of life is very much entrenched in Hinduism. So he heavily borrowed from these Vedas and Puranas. In Bhagavad Gita, we say that the soul passes from one body to another body, and that again that human being gets a birth, rebirth in the form, and that soul is immortal and body is a frail vessel. And therefore, this God, God is the one who fires the life into the frail vessel, empty vessel. He says that body is nothing but an empty vessel, he says, and therefore, thou will taste again and again and fillest ever with a fresh life. And therefore, this particular concept of rebirth, idea of rebirth, and soul being immortal is taken from, of course, Indian religion and Indian mythology, right? Then he comes to this another feature of his writing is the idea of of course, idea of emancipation. Emancipation, we call that as deliverance. Okay, like in his poem called the Song of Deliverance, Song number 10. He appeals those pseudo religious people to give away the reading and chantings, because he says that God is not in the temple. He is in the one who is working in the field, who is actually tilling the ground, one who is actually sweating outside with tattered cloth and stained body sort of thing, you'd say. And therefore, he says that if you wishes to achieve the emancipation, the only way of deliverance, actually deliverance, is to toil hard. Only chanting and reading will not give an emancipation. If one wishes to achieve emancipation, one has to work very, very hard for that, and that too actually in the form of working in the field, directly, not by just chanting and reading the names of kind of God. So he has shown the path in this particular poem. He has this Indian kind of improved Indian kind of notion of emancipation. The way Sri Aurobindo thought of emancipation, that emancipation can be achieved, on the terrestrial, kind of level. He also has got the same terrestrial approach of achieving emancipation, not by just chanting and bidding the names of God or goddess for that matter, but by a sort of actually, working, hard in the field, because God is with the one who works. God is with the one who works very hard, who does a physical work sort of things he talks about. So in this way, that particular, kind of things of deliverance talks about. In addition to that, he was a kind of person with a kind of great philosophical approach. His poem is full of philosophy. If you look at each and every poem of this Gitanjali, you will see that every poem has got this particular aspect of philosophy, involved in it. And so is the case with all the two of the poems I just have discussed, right? So it come, when we discuss about Psalm number 35 and the kind of philosophy that he had, he talks about some philosophy called Vasudev Kumbhaka. Okay, because he was like a kind of a true, kind of Gramscian. Gramsci was a scholar. He was the one, who propagated this idea called the, intellectual without border. He was the one who, he was a Gramscian scholar who was without any borders, and therefore he created a sort of a kind of a philosophy, propagated the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in his very famous poem song number 35, where he says, where the mind is without fear and head is held high. He talks about that. He appeals the Indian that how we should live. It is an appeal to Indians, and it is an appeal to the Almighty that he wishes the God, he requests the God, he pleads the God to create a nation in such a way that after India achieves freedom from the clutches of British imperialism, in what state India should rise. He actually gives kind of catalogs numerous possibilities, number of things in the poem, in what state India should actually get freedom. In the poem, he says that where the mind is but fair and head is held high, where knowledge is free, and where we should not be broken into small, shallow fragments of caste, creed, color, and religion. So he criticizes this kind of various boundaries that these humans have created of the caste, creed, religion, and color. He was a man who was beyond all these actually, concepts of caste, creed, religion, and color. He wanted to create a nation that would be kind of a global village. He was of the view that everybody should treat everyone as brothers and sisters. No country, no caste, no religion, no creed should differentiate between each other. We should treat ourselves as a human first. And therefore, this concept, it seems that he propagates this philosophy of a Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that a whole world is a family, and we should not actually follow this shallow, actually, walls, narrow domestic walls, as he calls in the poem, of caste, creed, religion, color, and courage and color that have been created by the society, and should believe in the oneness of the society, oneness of the religion, and oneness of something called this group. And therefore, this philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is pretty much evident in this particular poem as well as we know. And therefore, he wishes that when we should say that we should strive continuously hard, very hard, for achieving the stream of reason. And therefore, he was an intellectual man, and he thought that in order to reach the state, we have to strive very hard, continuously, so as to reach the star of perfection at the end of the day, and that will be achieved through the continuous and persistent efforts of the humans. And therefore, he was the man who believed in the human endeavors. He was the one who believed in the struggles of the human. And he was the one who believed in the philosophy of life. And therefore, he propagated that if you want to achieve continuous, if you want to achieve perfection, one has to strive very hard, continuous. If not perfection, one would actually kind of go towards the star of perfection for sure. And so in this way, he also refers that this clear stream of reason, the logic would help us out in achieving the betterment of a humanity, in achieving our own self-betterment, and ultimately that will actually be beneficial for the humanity as a whole. So he has got this humanistic approach in this. So humanism is one of the quality of his poem, and he has got this humanistic approach in this poem. And therefore, his was a different human. He was a humanistic with a difference. Like in humanism, we know that people have got different approach, but he was a humanistic with difference, and that particular song number 35 proves this particular approach. So in this way, whatever time I could actually gather to complete, as Kapil sir had given me task of, teaching one whole unit in one and a half an hour. That was very difficult for me, kind of complete. Although I tried to touch upon the important aspects of the kind of assigned unit to me. So in this way, I would say that I will stop here. Whatever deliberations I have had today. If you have got any questions, there may be some links, or I have shared an email ID of mine. If you want to give me feedback, my email ID is here. You can refer this email ID, and furthermore, we can discuss if you have got any queries or anything like that. So with this, I thank the organizers of various colleges and departments for giving me an opportunity to connect with people in such a trying times. It is really a trying times, and we are all going through a phase recently.
Govind is waiting for questions.
Yeah.
So, well, Govind, you can stop sharing your screen.
Okay, sir.
Mr. Govind Rathod, he started with the topics which are prescribed for the background study, introduced us to the background of different poets and themes of their prescribed poetry, along with the general characteristic of each poet as a writer. So I thank Govind for this, for engaging this online class, and I also extend my appreciation to Dr. Karthik Panikar, who, in spite of some kind of difficulty in his neighborhood due to the COVID epidemic, pandemic, was there to help us out in this through his technical assistance. So thank you, Govind, once again, and we'll be meeting again at 5 o'clock in the evening. Dr. Nihal Sheikh, who would be speaking on Mulk Raj Anand's work, Two Leaves and a Bird. So thank you, Govind.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Karthik sir, for giving me an opportunity.
Yeah, he's not here, Govind.
See, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Fine, sir. Thank you, sir. Karthik sir. Thank you.
हाँ कपिल
हाँ हो गया है बंद
हाँ बंद कर